Welcome back. Welcome back, folks, to the A Kaizen Mind Book Club. I'm Linda Heffernan, behavioral scientist, executive leadership coach, cognitive behavioral hypnotherapist for executives. I can't remember what book club number this is. It's 5 or 6. Anyhow, last time we explored Hidden Potential by the incredible Adam Grant. And Adam looked at how character skills and learning strategies unlock abilities we didn't know that we had. Okay? And I told you last time that today's book is going to be Presence by Dr. Amy Cuddy. Presence, the science of showing up as your authentic self in high-stakes moments. Now, once again, this is one of my fundamental reads, my friends, and I need to address something up front. I do not like the term, and seldom, if ever, feel comfortable with the term executive presence. And I'll talk about that maybe a little later on, because Amy kind of refers to that. No, she actually does refer to that in the book. A quick verdict on this book: it's rigorous social psychology that dismantles the myth of performing presence and shows us how to access our genuine power. Nice. The core concept, well, presence is the state of being attuned to and comfortable to and able to comfortably express your true self in stressful situations. Sounds quite nice, doesn't it? Presence, according to Dr. Cuddy, is not about projecting confidence that you don't feel. It's about believing your story, your values, and your abilities. So, Amy defines presence as synchrony between your authentic self and also what you're expressing through your words, your body language, and your actions. And when you have presence, you're not wondering, how am I doing? You're fully absorbed in what you are doing. The book explores how our bodies shape our minds, just as our minds shape our bodies. The central research: power posing, how adopting expansive physical postures can increase feelings of confidence and power. But here's what matters more in this book for me. Presence isn't a performance, it's alignment. And Cuddy distinguishes between convincing others versus convincing yourself first. The path to presence starts with self-nudges, tiny adjustments that help you access your authentic power. Very Kaizen. She explores imposter syndrome, she calls it. You know that I call it an imposter mindset. She explores stereotype threat and how powerlessness becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The book takes us through neuroscience, psychology, and real-world applications, from job interviews to negotiations to personal challenges, just the way I like my behavioural science books. Most importantly, Cuddy tells us that presence is about being present, not performing presence. And my clients always pay attention after working with me to the being and not just the doing. So let's talk about the science here and why this matters. Amy Cuddy has incredible credentials. She's a social psychologist at Harvard Business School. She has a BA from the University of Colorado and an MA and PhD from Princeton. Her TED Talk is the second most viewed in history, with over 70 million views. The research here focuses on non-verbal behavior, on power dynamics, and how people judge and influence each other. She has received multiple teaching awards and recognition for her research contributions. Her work on embodied cognition, so how we feel and think, shows how physical experiences shape psychological states. So I'd like to look here at now why I find executive presence as a term kind of problematic. The phrase executive presence to me suggests there's a performance that you need to perfect. It's a persona that you need to construct. And not everybody does that, but some people do, and it can be quite narcissistic in its approach. Executive presence as a term and as a construct to me implies that to lead, you must adopt certain prescribed behaviors, speech patterns, even physical presentations. Now, there is a certain way that those in the C-suite, perhaps, or in very, very senior leadership, need to be in their own presence, their own state. I think that's something innate, internal, intrinsic. When you construct it, it's fabricated, and I think it comes off as phony. This construct is fundamentally at odds with what Cuddy's research actually shows. Executive presence is typically taught as conforming. It's a code for conforming to narrow, often exclusionary standards that favor certain demographics. It asks you to be less yourself and more like some imagined ideal. And that's not to exclude polishing, okay? Honing skills, polishing skills such as communication or how you hold yourself. But what I care more about is presence as an executive, not executive presence. And there's a distinction for me. Being genuinely present, attuned, authentic, and aligned with your values means that you show up fully as yourself and not constructing an alternative version. And the research backs this. Cuddy's studies show that when we try to project power that we don't feel, we leak anxiety signals, and our bodies betray the performance. But when we access genuine confidence through alignment, our physiology, our psychology, and our behavior, everything synchronizes. And this is what makes others feel safe, feel seen, and led. For executives and leaders, your job isn't to perform presence, it's to be present. And when you are worried about how you're coming across, you can't attend to what actually matters: your team, your stakeholders, the problem at hand, maybe even your family, maybe even your friends. Maybe if you're a sports coach, kids football or rugby on a Saturday, maybe it's that. True leadership presence comes from internal alignment, not external performance. So, Linda, what works with this book? Well, this book is deeply personal, and Amy Cuddy shares her own experience with imposter mindset, she calls it syndrome, after a brain injury. She has now, thankfully, recovered. Her vulnerability here makes the science accessible and the strategies feel achievable. This is behavioural science at its core, deeply researched, but presented in a very accessible way. And that's just the way I like it. The power posing research has been debated, okay, and whilst debated, points to something profound. Our bodies influence our psychological states, and we behavioural scientists know this. Even if there is debate around original effect sizes, okay, even though they were questioned, the underlying principle of embodied cognition is well established. There are practical strategies that you can use immediately in this book, or if you watch the TED Talk. Adopting expansive postures before high-stakes situations, focusing on your values rather than others' judgments, reframing anxiety as excitement, research-backed techniques, okay? That is a research-backed technique, I meant to say. Using self-nudges, small adjustments that shift your internal state. Very Kaizen. The concept of warmth before competence. People need to trust you before they'll respect your abilities. There is an emphasis on preparing your presence, not your performance. Cuddy's breakdown of what actually undermines presence, self-doubt, rumination, comparing yourself to others, is actually very important and insightful. The book addresses both individual psychology and the social structures that make presence harder for underrepresented groups, and that's very important. It's perfect for anyone facing high-stakes situations, leading others, or struggling with imposter mindset. Some honest positioning on the book. This is rigorous social psychology from a Harvard psychologist and researcher. Cuddy's work is grounded in peer-reviewed studies and established psychological principles. There is an important context. The power-opposing research sparked controversy in psychology's replication crisis, and I do recognize this. Some studies failed to replicate the original hormonal changes found in Cuddy's research work, and Cuddy has been transparent about this, acknowledging debates while standing by the core findings about psychological states. There is a broader principle here that body shapes mind, and this remains well supported in embodied cognition research. Critics do note that the book focuses heavily on individual psychology and less on systemic barriers. Cuddy acknowledges this, discussing how structural factors make presence harder for marginalized groups, and I think that's a good call. But the book's primary focus is what you can control, your internal state and alignment. And there is an important distinction, I think, here. This book is not about positive thinking or fake it till you make it. You know I'm allergic to that. It's about reducing the gap between who you are and how you show up. Some may find the personal anecdotes more valuable than others. This varies by reader. I happen to like it. It humanizes the work. It humanizes the research. It grounds it in real human experience. It was published in 2015, so it does predate some conversations about authenticity and leadership. I still think it has influenced many of those conversations. Now, why do I almost reject the term executive presence? Well, for me, the concept typically describes a checklist, and I have heard people talking to me, clients, about wanting more executive presence, and they give me a list when I ask them, what does it mean to you? Sometimes they actually don't know what it means. Sometimes leaders or managers in tripartite meetings will say, I think you should have more executive presence. And I get curious, well, what does that mean to you? And why is that important? The checklist often sounds like a firm handshake, great eye contact, commanding voice, certain dress codes, gravitas, an interesting one, and polish. These, my friends, are performance metrics. They are not presence metrics, okay? And they often reflect cultural biases about what leadership looks like, maybe sounds like, but it's more visual. The result? Diverse leaders spend energy conforming rather than contributing. What we actually need is leaders who are present. 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 In here. And that means attuned to the room around you, not monitoring yourself. Aligned with your values, not performing someone else's. Authentic in expression, not manufactured. And responsive to what's needed, not following a script or a cookie cutter, biscuit cutter understanding of what presence is. Cuddy's research supports this, actually, so I feel vindicated. Authentic leadership presence comes from internal synchrony, not external performance. And when you are genuinely present, when your body, your mind, and your values are aligned, people feel it. That's what creates trust, connection, and influence. It's not the performance of presence, but presence itself. And this matters, folks, because time spent constructing executive presence is time not spent being present. Energy spent on performance is energy not spent on purpose. And the most powerful leaders that I've worked with aren't performing anything. They are fully there. They are present. And that's what Cuddy's book actually teaches. If we strip away the misapplication of her work to support executive presence training, she actually is showing you a roadmap to how you can feel and be present. So, bottom line, folks, should I read this? Should we read this, Linda? Absolutely. If you face high-stakes situations where you need to show up fully, if you struggle with imposter mindset or self-doubt, if you're tired of performing and want to access your authentic power, if you want to understand how physical state influences psychological state, if you're building leadership capacity grounded in authenticity, not performance, and if you want to connect the dots from our previous books to embodied presence. My take on this, what does Linda think? Okay, Presence by Amy Cuddy. This is where the psychological meets the physical. Dweck taught us mindset matters. Duckworth showed us sustained effort trumps talent. Peters gave us tools for emotional regulation. Grant revealed how character skills unlock potential. And Mel Robbins at the very beginning got you curious about thinking about all of this. Now Cuddy shows us that our bodies and minds work together, that presence isn't something we perform, it's something we access through alignment. This completes our foundation: beliefs, effort, emotional intelligence, character development, and now embodied authenticity. Presence is essential reading because it reminds us that leadership isn't a costume we wear, it's who we are when we're fully present. There you go. So next time, Linda, what are we looking at? This is a biggie one, and I had to bring my cleanest copy to show you. I have 3, scribbled in some, added more to others. Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. She's just the most incredible writer. It's an absolute powerhouse read, particularly for women in leadership, but not limited to women in leadership. Brené Brown has written so many excellent books, and I have them all. Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, Atlas of the Heart. I mean, there's more. I struggled deciding where to begin. But Dare to Lead, I think, is the right starting point. It's where all her vulnerability research meets practical leadership application. Actually, she just released a new book in September called Strong Ground. I'm waiting to read it. I have it in my pile at the moment. But Dare to Lead really remains the foundation, I think, for our book club. And it's a fantastic read. Here's why Dare to Lead is a fantastic read and why it matters for leadership. So we're in a world that tells leaders to armor up, to have all the answers, to never show weakness. Brown gives us permission to lead from a place of vulnerability. And that's not weakness. It's the birthplace of courage, innovation, and genuine connection. Leadership isn't about being invulnerable, folks. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable, whilst others are being held accountable. So Brown shows us that courage, connection, and compassion aren't just human skills or soft skills, if that's what you call them. They're the skills that make hard things possible. And in organizations where trust is eroding and change is constant, vulnerable leadership isn't optional, it's essential. And that's revolutionary. And that's what makes Dare to Lead vital reading. So I will put the book link down in the description, if I remember. Excuse me. If you're finding value in these reviews, subscribe, like. I'm building a complete framework for authentic leadership and continuous growth. I'm building a library review so that you don't have to buy the book without hearing something about the book first. And until then, stop performing presence and start being present. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for giving yourself time to work on your growth mindset. And until next time, look after yourself.